Greg Sutton, Chief Academic Officer for Hardin County Schools, and I want to welcome you guys to the 2022-23 school year. This is our first segment of Impacting Learning, Empowering Students. And we've already had a good start to this school year. Although the students aren't in school yet, we've already had a great start. We've already had 2 Back-to-School Fests this week, one at John Hardin High School for the Bulldogs. We had the Trojans last night, and we got the Bruins coming up on Thursday. So we already got families back out with their kids. They're thinking about school. They're thinking about school supplies. And our family resource coordinators deserve a big shout out for that. And we definitely need to do a show for our family resource centers. They are doing a super great job supporting our families and our schools. So that's been our kickoff so far. But today's segment specifically is kind of a focus on our district interventionists, our MTSS interventions. You're going to say, well, what does that mean? Well, it stands for multi-tiered system of supports. And over the past few years, we have tried to look at ways that we could fill gaps for students. I know we had some learning breaks, through COVID, and we had to fill some of those learning gaps. And we thought, what's the best way to do that? So we started looking at some of our ESSER funds, and we said, hey, I think we can put some interventionists in schools and maybe do some small group work with our kids and have an impact. Now, we've got quite a few across our district at each school. So I asked one of our elementary school interventionists and one of our high school interventionists to come here today, so you can kind of get a broad range of ideas of what this looks like across our district. So thank you for joining us here today, and I want to introduce who's with us. We have Miss Kalina Vance from Pine Grove Elementary School. Kalina, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and we have Miss Jenny Stucker from John Hardin High School Interventions. Jenny, thanks for being here with us.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to get started here today and just kind of ask you a few questions and kind of help our Hardin County School community, our families, to know the impact that you're having and kind of what we're doing in our schools. So, when you first heard these interventionist positions that were posted for Hardin County Schools, what motivated you to apply for this position? Jenny, we'll just start with you. And what made you think to say, this is something I might want to do for kids?
I was fortunate enough to be an interventionist when I first moved up here to Hardin County. And I love being an interventionist because you really get to make those relationships with those kids. While you're making those relationships, you're getting to close the gaps. You get to have those, you get to build that rapport with them without all the stress of a classroom teacher that they have on them. So just getting to work with them and helping them grow, learn, close those gaps, especially from COVID, has really been great.
And obviously, Kalina, you being a very successful elementary school teacher in the classroom for a lot of years, what made you think, hey, this is something I think I want to do over the next few years to help kids?
Well, being an interventionist has been a career goal of mine for some time. So when I saw these positions posted, I really wanted to jump at the chance. I was excited to try something new and work with students at all grade levels because most of my experience has been in primary. So it was, getting to expand a little bit and work with those intermediate kids. And like Jenny said, I really wanted to get in there and close gaps after the challenges of the last few years.
I didn't even think about that. I mean, that's right. Sometimes we get limited to one grade level, but you probably got a chance to see the full, experience of what it looks like from K through
Yes.
5 and some of the challenges those kids were facing and how to meet those learning gaps. I'm glad you said that as an answer. What type of training did you all get to feel like you could be successful in this position? What did the district do to support you in that? Jenny, we'll let you start with that one.
We attended several different PD offerings through central office, with Stacy Bronner, Kristen Swords, and Tanya Corder, and then Debbie White's been huge. And then I would say the biggest thing for me is actually just getting in there and getting your hands wet, working with the kids, because once you're in there, you get those experiences, and you have to jump in and figure it out.
What about you, Ms. Vance? How was it for you?
I did the MTSS training with Stacy as well. For me, my primary focus was reading. So the Orton Gillingham training was huge, and I really feel like it made me a better reading teacher. Also with us implementing iReady, that training really prepared me to look at student data and create student groups, but also provide the targeted instruction to meet students where they were.
Well said. We talked about this last year, our new iReady diagnostic. We do that 3 times a year, the fall, winter, and spring, where we're monitoring growth of kids, not just in reading and math, but it's kind of interesting to hear the answers here because, as interventionists in some schools, if you have multiple interventionists, one may focus on reading, one may focus on math, one more primary, one more intermediate. In high school, I'm sure you may share some of that as well. Are you more math?
I'm pretty much the reading.
Pretty much the reading at the high school level. Okay. As far as the preparation being a challenge and completing your training, what did you kind of set as a short-term and long-term goal for yourself? Kalina, we're going to let you take this one first.
Short-term, I wanted to get in, develop those relationships with kids, close gaps, and get them on grade level. long term, I really wanted to develop a love of learning and reading in them, and I wanted them to feel successful at school.
All right. Jenny?
I would say pretty much exactly what Kalina said, but it's a little different with the high school because I mostly work with freshmen, and so you know that the real world is waiting on them. Within, their time of school is coming to a close. And so I wanted to focus on not only making them productive in the classroom, but making them productive citizens for our community when they graduate.
And I think it's important they see the reason why we had multiple interventions on here today from different levels, because it is that. I mean, elementary school, we're trying to put a big emphasis on how can we help each student make 1 year of growth, regardless of where they start the school year. How can we move them toward grade level, like Ms. Vance is saying? And then we get to high school, and we sit here and say, where are we at toward post-secondary readiness? Where are we at toward that pathway? Where are we at toward me, on my benchmark for ACT? Where am I at for my co-op opportunity? There's so many things that we look at from an elementary student to a high school student, but you still see the supports are in place. That's the most critical part that I see here. And when you got the job, you probably said to yourself, how do I go about selecting students for this? How do I know who I'm working with? Because really, intervention is not just about a certain percentile level of kid at all times. We got to think about our kids that are struggling maybe in an area. What about our kids and our high kids that are maybe ready to make that next jump? So I'm just curious to hear, how did you go about selecting kids for this? Ms. Vance, we'll let you go first on this one as well.
A lot of collaboration with classroom teachers and administrators. We use the iReady diagnostic to really target kiddos within the 30th to 50th percentile.
Okay.
We also used at the elementary level the Orton-Gillingham phonics continuum, and I was able to pull small groups to really develop those foundational reading skills.
So those are kids, when you think about the 30th to 50th percentile, those are kids that are ready to move to proficiency. Those are kids that are ready to make that next jump. They just need a few gaps filled, and we're ready to move them on and more closer to grade level. So that's very important. Jenny, what about you from a high school person? How did you go about selecting that group at high school? Where did you start?
I worked a lot with Miss Jones, who's one of our assistant principals, and we used the iReady as well. And then we had kids that came from Bluegrass that had already been kind of like pre-identified as kids that were movable, that we could get to that next bump up. And so that's how we made our list with the iReady and the MTSS kids too. That's
good. Student growth has been a hot topic across, the nation. That's what we want to do, ensure that 1 year of growth. We talked about that. Make sure students are making progress at all levels and demonstrating that 1 year of growth like we talked about. What tools did you all have in place at your level to monitor that growth? I have to ask that question because we do this work, we select our students, we input all these strategies, but what tool did you use to help you know that they were making that jump? And Jenny, we'll start with you on this one.
We, of course, had like the MTSS graphs, we had the iReady data, but the coolest thing that I thought that we did at John is we made a data tracker for all freshmen. And so they had their iReady scores that they scored in the fall, and then an administrator met with them before they took the next one and had a conversation with them like, this is your goal, this is where we want you to be, this is what this score means. And then they touched base with them again after the winter, right before the spring.
Goal setting. One of the things we talk about all the time, talking to students, listening to students, setting individual goals and doing that with them. And that's a critical component of what we do in schools is goal setting, and that's I appreciate you saying that. Kalina, from your perspective, what about you? How do you document that growth and know that you're making that difference with the kids?
Used a lot of iReady data, and our teachers did the same thing. They used that to set goals with students so that they knew what they were working towards. And what I love about iReady is it gives an overall score, but it also has the different domains. So you can really focus in on student successes in areas where they still need a lot of growth. And one of mine for the fall semester was nonfiction text. That was a need school-wide. And so that is what I worked a lot on. A large chunk of my day was spent in reading centers with my first and second graders. So I relied a lot on the Orton-Gillingham phonics continuum. And it was really exciting and rewarding to see them take those strategies and processes and not only watch their growth across the continuum, but just the way they retained what they had already learned and used it to become proficient readers.
Sounds like very skill specific.
Yes.
Very standards based. And that's an important part I think we need to focus on here. That somebody didn't ask you, but how many students did you work with this year? Jenny, how many students did you feel like you got to work with in 1 year? And that's I know we didn't probably prepare for that question, but it's kind of giving an estimate of the number of kids you would work with in a trimester.
I would say all year I probably had about I would say about 40 official kids. But the great thing about this job is that they tell their friends, hey, if you go in there, she can help you with your stuff. So at John, we have this thing called Focus 40. It's kind of like a study hall type. And every time we would have the Focus 40s, I would have more kids that were not necessarily my kids, but they would come and be like, hey, can you just help me with this? I need help with this assignment. So officially, I would say about 40 to 50.
But yet kids are sometimes moving out, in and out of that intervention as well.
Right. But they would always still want to come back and hang out with me.
That's right. Well, that because they see the support.
Right, yes.
That's why we're talking about this.
Right.
The supports are in place. Now, Ms. Vance, what about you? About how many kids did you work with this year, and what did your schedule look like?
I usually had about 130 kids. And it was, a large chunk of that was my first and second graders because I was able to pull them for centers. And then I did 30-minute blocks with all the other grade levels. And kind of what she said, just a lot of flexibility. When teachers saw a need and they thought I could push a kid really quick, you know, they would jump in for a little bit. And I always said I was like the fun educational aunt, kind of like what Jenny said. You know, they would want to come and we would have fun learning, and then they got to go back to class. But they always seemed excited to come. So.
But from a tiered perspective, did some of your students move out of that tier based on their success?
Yes. After our winter diagnostics, some kids were released and other kids were moved in depending on the needs.
Skill. That is it's very neat. So it's very fluid.
Yes.
It's not something you just get caught in, hey, these are my kids, and they're constantly coming in and out. So Jenny, you know, you've worked at an elementary school, and that's very strange that you've had this opportunity to work in an elementary and now a high school. So what would you say that would be the biggest difference and the biggest challenge you faced going from elementary school now to a high school? What was the difference?
My biggest insecurity was the fact that they were big kids, that they weren't little size-wise. I remember right before school started, I thought, what in the world am I getting myself into? Because I've never worked with these big kids before.
I felt that way about my fifth graders.
But once I got in there, the more I realized that good instruction is good instruction. And it was just, I was worried for myself, but I have the skill set. I can do it. Right. It was just my insecurity that they're big.
And how well high school kids communicate.
Right. Well, and do you build rapport with your kids the same way? What does your classroom procedures look like? I didn't know, but I can do it.
Well, whereas a first grader may have a little more difficult time explaining their need for help. They may not understand what they don't understand, and they'll explain that to you. Whereas you explain a while ago, a high school kid can come to you and say, I don't understand this concept.
Correct.
I need some additional support.
Right.
And you can hone in on that skill.
Right.
Sometimes that communication level, because of the maturity and the age, that's probably the difference. But what she says is the same is true. A second grader is light years different from a fifth grader in the, how they can communicate and how they can, go through the process as well. So, but Kalina, after doing your job for 1 year, what adjustments would you make? You said, hey, I did this year one. What does year two look like for you?
I'm really excited to implement Orton-Gillingham with my older students because of the timeline. Our third, fourth, and fifth graders didn't have that in primary. So I'm really excited to use some of that with those kids who are still building foundational reading skills.
Yes.
I want to continue to be really intentional with identifying students who just need a little extra help. And I would love to expand and work more with students who are on grade level, but we know we can get more from them and just push them and see where we can take them.
I like to hear that. We're going to challenge our students. We're going to push our students. We're going to have high expectations. And you always hear about the achievement gap. A lot of time it's the expectation gap. What do we expect from our kids? And I think that this is an opportunity for us to push kids at all levels of where they're at. And that's what I'm saying. We got to think about our high kids. How can we grab some of those 60, 70 percentile kids and move them? And I'm glad you mentioned Orton-Gillingham. Orton-Gillingham, first talked about that before. It's our foundational skills for reading. We have probably another 100 teachers getting trained this week in the comprehensive K-1-2, the morphology, 3 through 5 training for Orton-Gillingham. So all these skill-based foundational skills for reading are getting into our teachers' hands. And Ms. Vance is going to be able to do that right there in her classroom as an interventionist, which is very important. Now, let's talk about this. Let's talk about success stories. We're in this business because, one, we love kids. Two, we're here to support kids, and we're here to love our families. But let's talk about success stories. And what are some success stories you all had this year? Jenny, we'll let you go first there. Tell me about a success story.
At the beginning of the year, I got my list of kids of who, I was going to be working with, and there was one that they said, that they're probably not really going to like coming in there. You're going to have to really work, with that child. Mm-hmm. So they came in there, we worked on the reading, the foundational skills, and we just kind of clicked. We formed a bond. We had a, great rapport. She would come by and see me in the hallway. Everybody knew if she wasn't where she was supposed to be, she was probably with me. And so towards the end of the year, she made a bad choice. And when they called her down to the office, they were talking to her about it, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "Do not tell Miss Stucker. I do not want her to know that I did this because she's going to be so disappointed with me." So I think my favorite part of this job is just getting to make those relationships with those kids. When I was in high school, if I would have gotten in trouble, the first thing I would have said is, "Please don't tell my parents." But the fact that she held me in such high esteem, that she did not want to disappoint me, the opportunities that lends itself to for all of us to make those impacts with those kids.
The most important thing is relationships, and I learned that this week with the PD that I went to on Roger Cleveland. He said, "Care before content, attachment before assessment." And when he said that, it just kind of hit home to me that that's right. Before we can teach kids, we got to show them how much we care, and before we can expect kids to do their best on assessment to the best of their ability, they have to show that we developed that bond, that attachment, and that's very important. So thank you for sharing that. Ms. Vance, what about you? What a success story you had this year?
Mine isn't really a specific student, but just a grade level. I loved working with my first graders.
Okay.
Last year, kindergarten is such a crucial year, and a lot of their time was either spent on the AB schedule or online. So I felt like I knew that was a priority. I had to help them, and get them. And just the excitement they had to have a regular year, a routine, and the way that they just developed, especially as readers. I'm a firm believer in Orton Gillingham, and I really witnessed that with my first graders. People, when they would come in our classroom, they would be amazed at the words that they were able to read because they truly understood the process of reading. And it was just incredibly rewarding to see their enthusiasm and progress.
That's great. Of course, I was principal at Vine Grove whenever Ms. Vance was there as a second grade teacher, and I probably should have tried to convince her maybe first grade would be where you need to be. And I don't think I would have been able to do that at the time, so that's good to hear.
It's fun for 20 minutes, and then,
now we know. Okay. All right. Good to hear that. Anything else, any final comments you want to make about just your experience as an interventionist, or anything you're looking forward to in the next year? Anything?
I would say getting to see my kids again that I worked with last year. I can think of one specific student who he struggled with reading, but he was really good with math. So when they were with me, if there was somebody else that needed math help, I would always say, "Hey, you're my math guy. You go over there and help them." And so just getting to see, those students feel some success.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Just really excited to get back in there, develop those student relationships, just ready to go and see what we can do.
I'm ready too. I'm ready for the 22-23 school year, and we have a lot of exciting things coming up. And I know aside from this, you'll hear us talk about the cosmetology program this year. That's going to be one of our new pathways. We've got 12 students jumping into that this year, and we have a partnership with Campbellsville University on that. So that's something new and exciting that we have going on for our kids in Hardin County schools. Esports is on its way, hopefully. We're looking at funding that process for our high schools and get some coaches hired for that opportunity for kids. And I would say hiring our second law enforcement teacher, huge. That's a growing pathway. Excited about where we're headed with residential maintenance. Again, you've heard us talk about that a lot. So our pathways are growing, our opportunities are growing. If you ever get a chance to be a part of Hardin County schools, I think you're going to be happy with the experience that your children are going to have. So we're happy to work with them and excited about the school year. So thank you all for joining on this segment of Impacting Learning and Empowering Students, and hope to see you next month. Thank you.